Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Disruption Talks, where we find amazingly cool companies and we find even cooler people working at those companies to tell us everything about their expertise on all things digital. And today, the topic is outcome-based cybersecurity, innovating towards a safer future. The company that we found for today is WithSecure. You might know it. It's got over 1,000 employees. It's been in the business for quite some time. Founded in 1988. And joining us today is Artturi Lehtiö. I hope I haven't butchered the name or the surname. And Artturi serves as the Vice President for Research and Development for Agents at WithSecure. Welcome, Artturi.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks for having me here.
So, usually we follow this structure of first we talk about you, then we talk about the company, and then we talk about the industry. So with that in mind, I sometimes allow my guests to introduce themselves first, but I'm just looking at your LinkedIn, and if we could start with the 7 years that you have at F-Secure Corporation that then became WithSecure. So essentially it's the same company, if I understand correctly, almost 10 years running.
Yeah, I think it was 9 years start of June. So yeah, I've been a bit over 9 years now at what was previously known as F-Secure, now is known as WithSecure.
Okay. And you've been through a huge variety of positions. You've been Director of Service Technology, started as a senior consultant, if I'm not mistaken, and right now your position is VP R&D for Agents. So if you could just tell us a little bit more, what does that exactly mean, R&D for Agents at WithSecure?
Yeah, and maybe I'll take a small step back still. So yeah, I joined the company 9 years ago. I joined actually as a summer intern. So I was studying computer science at the time. I'd been interested in cybersecurity for a long time already. Already as a child, I was interested in computers and then specifically cybersecurity. So I applied for a summer internship at F-Secure and joined the company. And yeah, I've been really lucky, really fortunate since then to be able to have been through many different roles, many different learnings. I've done cybersecurity research, malware analysis. I've done consulting. I've done corporate strategy and M&A, portfolio management. And yeah, now my latest role is leading one of our R&D, one of our software development organizations. So Agents, we're about 80 people, 80 developers and quality engineers. And really our responsibility is any code that runs on customer devices. So if the parts of our software that are running on your computer or your company's server or your laptop, your mobile phone, that's our responsibility, our organization's responsibility. And then really my job is to try and help make sure everyone in the organization can be successful and can thrive and can enjoy their work and hopefully be successful in a way that then also makes the company successful and helps the company and the broader society.
Sure. Thank you for taking that step back and giving that additional context. And I want to ask you for some more. At which point did cybersecurity and R&D start intertwining with the job that you are doing right now, right? It's not that it started on the day, something had to happen before, right? So I'm curious about that.
Good question, Philip. I think there's probably three things really that have set the path in a sense. I think one is I've always been passionately curious about very specific things, and I've also been fast at changing my the object of my curiosity. If I find something even more interesting, I'll pivot toward that. Computers I've been interested in from a young age, but I think it's not been enough to understand how they work. I've also wanted to understand how they're supposed to not work and how to make them do what they're not supposed to do, how to break things, how to break the rules. And that's probably what drew me into cybersecurity. So I think early on it was more, I like technical challenges. I'm an engineer by nature, and I like cybersecurity. So I wanted to get into the technical side of that. But then really the other curiosity or other passion is how can things be more than the sum of their parts? how is 1 + 1 more than 2? And in corporate strategy, why do you have multiple businesses in the company? Why are they greater together than they would be separate? Like, to me, that's, math is supposed to say 1 + 1 is 2. Why is it not just 2? Why is it more? Or leadership, as a team, why is it better for us to work together? We need to spend time drinking coffee with each other and getting to know each other and in meetings and all of that. Why is it not better to just spend the time working on our own, doing more? Why is it better for us to work together? And that's the other interesting thing. And that's really, why I started technical, but then I was really drawn into understanding business side, understanding, how we, as a relatively small company in a massive industry, and coming from, a small place, Finland, in Northern Europe, competing against big US companies, how can we be more than the sum of our parts, more than our size? And then also into leadership, okay, we've got 80 people. That's a big organization. But at the same time, how can we do even more than what 80 people individually would be able to do?
I'm really liking that. I did not expect us to get so deep with more than the sum of our parts. I'm really appreciating that. We're 7 minutes?
It's a philosophical Wednesday.
Yeah. So since you have this genuine interest in cybersecurity, if you could tell me, what do you think are the most pressing challenges to do with the security sector that we need to address, other than people sharing passwords, not via password managers, but on Teams, on Slack, and the human element, of course. But I'm curious about the things that we try to manage with technology outside of the human element.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned very valid cybersecurity topics, but I think, those are small practical things. I think the big challenge is, I think one, there's three things I want to mention. The first that I'm passionate about is just demystifying cybersecurity. And this is on us in the industry. We, for one reason or another, we make it sound like it's somehow this very complex, mysterious, separate thing. And if you don't know cybersecurity, you don't know cybersecurity. It's not. Yeah, there's uniqueness to everything, but we aren't doctors and we aren't biochemists developing medicines. We can still try and live a healthy life. We don't need to understand all the details. There's a good reason there's doctors and I go and ask a doctor for help, but I don't need a doctor to help me try and live a healthy life. And cybersecurity should also be something that it's not, just for those who do cybersecurity, and the rest of us somehow wouldn't have the possibility of understanding it. So I think demystifying cybersecurity is the biggest challenge. And then really through that, the two other challenges we need to solve. One is turning cybersecurity from a specialist subject into business as usual. Again, living a healthy life. Some of us are more successful at it, some of us are less successful at it, but it's part of life, not a separate topic. Cybersecurity shouldn't be a separate specialist topic for a small group of people. It's part of business as usual. It's part of the trade-offs you do in business, or building technology. And then I think, the third big challenge we have is in technology in general. I believe the gap between, those at the forefront who are able to keep taking new technologies into use, taking new best practices into use, getting those benefits, they're able to keep running faster and faster and do more. And at the same time, those who are a bit further behind, whether it's in adoption or whether it's in maturity or know-how, they're falling further and further behind. And the gap is only widening. And that's also in cybersecurity. I think, we already have security haves and security have-nots. People who've been able to, for one reason or other, if you've been able to, stay ahead on things, security is a lot easier for you to do. Versus, if for one reason or another you're stuck with, you have Windows 7 workstations running and you haven't been able to get out of that, or, you're running your own servers in your own, basement, and you only have a couple of people taking care of those, a lot of other things get harder as well. And you're already starting from way behind on security. So I think avoiding where we end up with, a small group of security haves and they, everything's great for them, and then the rest are doomed from the start. I think that's something we need to also avoid. And I think, again, it starts in large part from demystifying cybersecurity. It's not such a complex separate topic in itself.
I am absolutely in love with the doctor analogy. It changed the way I view cybersecurity. I've been a pretty good boy when it comes to cybersecurity because we have really good teachers of cybersecurity and it grew internally. But this analogy of you don't have to be a doctor to eat well, sleep well, and move around is a good metaphor for the fact that you don't need to understand cybersecurity, but you can still practice it, or at least not get in the way of a good practice of cybersecurity. Do you have any ideas for solutions for this adoption disparity? How to close that gap?
So I think in terms of adoption, in terms of closing the gap, it's actually it's the same. I think it's a lot of the same. I talk with some of the R&D teams, for example. It's the same. Like I've got teams who have that have been under resourced, for example, for a long time, and they've fallen behind. And then the natural thinking is, okay, how do I catch back up? That's not realistic. Also, that's not very motivating because, often you kind of know that unless something dramatically changes, I'm not just going to be running so much faster to kind of catch up. So I think that's the first thing we need to shift away from. It's not about catching up. It's about, accepting where we are now and figuring out what's most important right now, what makes most sense right now. And I think in terms of cybersecurity, a lot of it comes down to thinking about what are the outcomes you're actually looking for. Not just the threats or the assets or the risks you have, but actually the outcomes you're trying to achieve. No one, you don't really care about catching malware on a laptop. That's not the end of it. You care about catching that malware because you want to keep the laptop operational, for example, because you have a business to run. So there is an outcome you're looking for that's usually not a cybersecurity outcome, it's a business outcome. So really starting from those and figuring out what best helps you in achieving those business outcomes and prioritizing from those, I think that's the big thing there.
Okay. When I asked that question, I was hoping for some how can we change the world and make cybersecurity more affordable, achievable. I'm thinking perhaps you can prove me wrong here that we might encounter a point in time where the regulation from governments might be such that there will be certain cybersecurity standards that businesses will have to keep in order to operate. Not the ones that are currently applicable, like the ISO standards and so on and so forth, but I'm even talking about smaller businesses that in order for, let's say, a country to maintain a healthy digital landscape and avoid cyber threats, everybody will have to fulfill some sort of license or a level of cybersecurity in order to operate.
I think we are going in that direction. I think there's already many or an increasing number of industry sectors fall under some kind of regulation, whether it's, for example, the NIS directive in Europe, which just got expanded to cover more sectors. So yes, that will play a part. And I think, but from my perspective, those can be helpful in providing a baseline, providing some guidance of what's, basics, what's best practices. But I think a lot of the basic cybersecurity, basic hygiene, it is relatively available and relatively affordable. But I think it goes back to demystifying things again. It starts from basics and really helping people understand what are the basics that give you, the biggest bang for the buck. Whether it's, multi-factor authentication, for example, that consumers have learned to embrace now in the past couple of years, simply because the big platforms they're using, whether it's Facebook's or Twitter's or Microsoft services or Google, they've just started rolling it out. Felt strange at the start, or online banks as well. At least in Finland, it's multi-factor authentication. It's been for a while. It felt strange at the start, but you kind of get used to it. And actually, the cybersecurity impact from those is massive. It's a massive improvement over what we had. So I think that's some of the things. But I think your point about public health, public safety. There was an interesting conversation I was in. I think it was already 2015, so 8 years back. With some politicians and government employees from Baltic countries. And one of the discussions was, seatbelts came to cars because people were getting hurt in accidents all the time, and people weren't bothering with the seatbelts because people didn't feel it was worth it and they weren't being told they had to. And then government started mandating wearing seatbelts. Do we need certain mandates on certain things for people to kind of protect them from themselves and protect each other? Maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the thing there would be, but I think it's an important conversation to be having.
So looking forward to find out how deep it will go, because always with regulation that is supposed to bring anything to a certain level, there's always the have-nots who, for example, cannot afford the newer workstation. So I'm curious to see what are we going to do about that. But let's proceed a little bit. I'm sure we're going to return to some topics similar to this one later in the conversation. But right now, trying to transition into the company element, I wanted to ask you, as much as you can tell us, of course, without breaking any NDAs or making any people unhappy, can you discuss any project or innovation that you and your R&D team has worked on recently or in the past, something that's out there that you're okay to talk about? And I'm curious to learn if it had an impact on cybersecurity for customers and partners, or was it just purely R&D?
Yeah, sure. One example I've been liking to use recently, we launched a new feature in May at Sphere, our annual big customer partner event. Feature we call rollback. So where it starts from is ransomware is one of the issues that companies have been struggling with in recent years. So a malicious actor, a hacker, an attacker, they get access to your computers, but more importantly, your data. And then they'll encrypt the data so that you don't have access to it anymore. And then they ask you for a ransom. They ask you to pay them. And then they say, if you pay us, then we promise we'll give you your data back. And that's a big problem. And so one of the things we worked on, and there were people involved in my organization, but also in other parts of the company. So this was very much a cross-functional effort, like most great innovation, I think, is of what can we do about it? How do we help our customers in those situations? And we developed the capability. It's basically an undo button, a rollback capability or an undo button for your computer. So if you get hit by ransomware and the ransomware starts encrypting your files with the click of a button, now you can roll back those changes, go back to the data you had, and remove the ransomware from those computers. And that's really a combined effort of having people who intimately understand the tools the bad guys are using, the criminals are using, analyzing, researching those, combined with people who understand very low-level operating system fundamentals, understand how to develop high-performance, telemetry, high-performance software code, so that we're able to then also maintain that state so that we can actually roll back into it. And having those people work together across teams to develop that capability.
That's another great quote I just made note of. Great innovation is a cross-functional success.
Yes.
Always worth remembering. So speaking more on WithSecure, is there some sort of holy grail, or at least a good case study that you have where WithSecure's efforts, or your team specifically, helped prevent some sort of loss, damage, or anything, prevented the business outcome that we didn't want to happen thanks to cybersecurity?
So, for example, with rollback, we've already had customers who we've saved their business with that capability, with that functionality. And those are the stories that really make it worth the effort for the developers as well, and make it worth the effort for the researchers as well. And it's always great to hear those stories from customers where we've really been able to help them out, save their business. And
in the spirit of demystifying cybersecurity, would it be an apt metaphor to say that rollback is simply reload last checkpoint in the game, essentially, the last valid checkpoint? Or is that too much of a simplification?
No, it's not. It's very close, but I think I'd simplify it even further. You click undo when you make a mistake, when you're writing something or you're doing something. It's an undo button, basically.
Okay. or Command or Control Z, depending on the platform.
Exactly. Depending on your preference.
So another question that I've got here is, with a history of providing antivirus software, how has WithSecure expanded its offerings to cover broader cybersecurity challenges?
Good question again, Philip. I think there's two parts to the answer. I think the other is, as you mentioned, WithSecure originally got founded in 1988 as data fellows, and data fellows for a few years did anything and everything from software development projects to database administration to whatever. But very early on in the 90s, one of the issues our customers at the time kept coming back to us on was cybersecurity issues and viruses and malware specifically at the time, asking for us to help. So we started getting into the antivirus business. So it's been a business we've been in for a long time. It's our longest lasting business, but it's not been the only business along the way in the past either. For many years, we had a successful business developing, for example, SSH clients. That was another product line for us. So, solutions for securely remotely accessing other computers. Also virtual private network solutions. That's a business we've been in the past. So I think, and that's another, when you've been for an old enough company, that's also part of innovation. You get into new businesses, you exit old businesses. Sometimes you sell or divest them. Sometimes you just, customers stop asking and stop buying, and you try and learn from that, but you stop doing the business. So I think in that sense, we've never been just an antivirus company in the past either, but it's what we've become best known for in the past, and it's been our longest lasting business. But I think in terms of how we expand, we've always had a big focus on what are the actual outcomes for the customers, what are the actual problems we're trying to solve for them. So we've always had a big research organization, not focused on software development, but focused on actually understanding the threats, understanding the attackers, understanding the security needs of customers. And that's been one big source of innovation for us, and one big source of new products, new services for us, of what are the threats we expect our customers to start encountering, or that they are encountering. What's the best way of solving it? It's not necessarily antivirus. And I think another there, especially in the past about 10 years or so, one of the things we've also done very intentionally is in 2015 we acquired a cybersecurity consulting company, and we've since acquired a couple more, and we these days we also have a thriving cybersecurity consulting business, smaller than our software business, but equally important, because there we work with some of the biggest banks in the world, some of the biggest technology companies in the world. We work with startups, we work with cloud native companies, we work with small businesses, gaming companies, so forth. And our consultants are working there on the front lines, seeing both what are the cybersecurity challenges for those companies at the forefront, also what are the solutions, and what's their broader IT and technology needs and ecosystem. How does cybersecurity fit into it? And then that gives us the insights in terms of how do we democratize that? How do we bring that to the masses? How do we bring that from those haves to the have-nots? How do we simplify it so that the rest of us can also benefit from it? So I think that's been another important area where, our consultants and the companies they work with, there's problems that antivirus might be the solution for. Most problems aren't solved with antivirus. That's why antivirus isn't our only business anymore. Again, learning from really what are those practical needs and practical solutions at the front lines.
Okay. So speaking of the front lines and putting us in our time traveling machine, R&D is by definition, by proxy, by virtue of the words research and development, something that's trying to catch up with the future or somehow stay ahead of it. I'm not sure how it's possible in terms of physics, but you understand what I'm talking about. And there's two questions I'd like to sort of merge. One is, how to spark R&D in the entire organization. And I'm already thinking that you're going to tell me that it's not about sparking. It's not something that just happens. It's something that takes time. And also, being this forward-thinking interviewer here, what is the long-term vision of the future for cybersecurity, for WithSecure or in general? Because, for example, when I think of just to use a recent example, AI. I know that there are large language models that are being developed into GPT-4, GPT-5, so we have that type of progression. We have some autonomy being developed, right? There's AI agents. So, for example, for AI, it's simple, even for a non-technical person like myself, to say that we are here, it would be going there. With cybersecurity, I think it's a chicken and egg problem. Tell me if I'm wrong to think this, but as long as you don't know what you're protecting yourself against, you can't really build defenses that will sufficiently protect you towards that. So unless can you figure out, can you imagine the threats of tomorrow and build the solutions of defense today, essentially?
Philip, you're asking many big questions there, so I'll try and answer some of them, and then if I forget the rest, please do re-ask. I'll start from your chicken and egg problem, because I think, at the risk of getting philosophical, and I think you certainly have a valid point there, and to an extent that applies, but I think it's also a mindset thing. One of my pet peeves is people like to say cybersecurity is so hard because the attacker only has to succeed once and the defender has to succeed every time. The defender has to stop every attack and only one attack has to get through. I don't think that's how it works. I think it works the opposite. An attacker has to take many steps to reach their objective, whether that's reaching some data that they want to steal, or reaching some data they want to encrypt, or reaching a system that they can cripple to take down your business, or whatever. You, on the other hand, you need to catch them at one of those points. You need to catch them at some point, or stop their progress at some point, to have been able to prevent that attack. So similarly, I think if you think about cybersecurity and defense purely reactively as building a defense for a known threat or a known attack, yes, then you're always playing catch up. But for example, that's why consulting is so important for us, because the work we do there is, a lot of it is, or the majority of it is proactive, whether it's red teaming, offensive security, where we take the role of the attacker and we try and figure out how we break, how we get into an organization, how we get into a network, so that we can take those learnings for that organization and for ourselves, but especially for that organization, of these are potential ways an attacker could come. Or threat modeling, for example, can be very dry and boring, can be super, super exciting, of thinking about how do I actually break this, or how do I make this work in a way it's not intended to. So I think there's a lot you can do there. I think in terms of really the future, there's two quotes I like relevant to that. I think the other by John Richardson Jr. When it comes to the future, there's three kinds of people. There's those who let the future happen, those who make it happen, and then there's those who wonder what happened. And so a lot of it is about which of those roles do you take for yourselves? Do you try to be one of those people who make it happen? Because that's one way you can shape it. And I think the other important thing, another good quote, one from William Gibson, is the future is here, but it's unevenly distributed. So I think, yes, sometimes something comes out of the blue, but I think for the most part, if you really keep your eyes and ears open and you really listen and you're really curious, you'll see signs of those things already. Ransomware, I mentioned, has been a massive challenge for companies in the past couple of years. What was one of my first research project as a summer intern 9 years back? Ransomware. And that was, at the time, we saw that as the second wave or second coming of ransomware. Ransomware first became a problem around the 2010, 2010 area. Went away for a few years. It was just coming back in 2014 when I joined as a summer intern. So that was one of the tasks I got that summer, was let's do a series of blog posts on ransomware. What's this new ransomware threat? Again, went away for a couple of years and then came back for the third time. So yes, there's reasons why it went away and reasons why it came back, and not everything is the same, but it's also not completely novel, completely out of the blue. So I think that's where I tend to get a bit philosophical, but that's how I think about future and prediction in this industry and more broadly.
Okay. I know that we have a question that's like a cherry on top of what I asked you and what you just told me. The question comes from Bartosz, so if you could have it on the screen. The question reads, how does the industry address the challenges of addressing new and emerging threats while ensuring compatibility with existing cybersecurity infrastructures? And I said cherry on top because Bartosz here emphasizes this compatibility with existing cybersecurity infrastructures. Has this ever been a problem? Is it something that needs to be always considered when you're trying to implement some sort of cybersecurity solution and its cohesion or compatibility with the entire setup?
I think it's one of the big challenges, and to me, it comes back to democratization. If you need to buy new toys every time there's a new threat, that's not sustainable. That's not going to work. So definitely, that's one of the big challenges. Or like we talked about in the past, if it was up to me, no one would be running Windows 7 anymore. At the same time, I'm very appreciative of there are reasons better and worse for why that's still reality in some cases, or why there are still mainframes running in various places. So definitely that's one of the challenges. And I think the most important, biggest way of addressing that is being very holistic and pragmatic. So engineers like to build rocket ships. They like to find the best, absolutely best solution for a problem. The technically coolest, most efficient, most innovative way of solving a problem. And chances are that's probably the best way, at least at the moment, for solving that problem. It's probably not the most practical. Then you've got the opposite end of the famous Ford misquote of, if I ask my customers, they'll ask for faster horses. That's also not the solution, but there's something in between those. So really thinking about, okay, what's a practical solution, and not limiting yourself. What I mean by being holistic, not limiting yourself to, okay, this needs to be solved by a piece of software, or even worse, this needs to be solved by our existing piece of software. Maybe that's not the right way of solving it. It's people, process, and technology. Often if the technology solution is a bit harder, maybe there's a people or a process solution that can help you at least get part of the way until you're able to take that technology solution into use. So I think that's where we need to think about cybersecurity more broadly, more pragmatically, more holistically than just being a technology solution, for example.
Okay, Bartosz, please let us know in the comments if this answered your question. I hope it did. So just a second ago in my explanatory analogy, I mentioned AI. So I'd love to hear whether this is a giant threat, a sea of opportunities, both from the cybersecurity standpoint, of course.
It's both. It's one of these, are you glass half full, glass half empty? I'm glass half full. I think it's more opportunity than threat. I think one thing is we've been using AI or machine learning for about 2 decades now. I think 18 years ago is when we officially launched the first features and major components for our products that was more statistical methods, was what we called it at the time, but machine learning, and eventually became AI. And we aren't the only ones either in the industry. So it's not an entirely new thing, but it's definitely, it keeps developing, and the power keeps increasing, and what you can do with AI, and especially how usable, approachable it is, that keeps improving. And a lot of it is just from our perspective, driving scale and efficiency. It means our technical experts, our researchers, can spend their time on harder technical problems than they could in the past, because we can use machine learning for some of those more mundane things. They don't need to look at as many variations of the same piece of malware or the same piece of attacker tooling, because machine learning is quite good at finding, what are slight variations of something that's already known. So they can focus on novel things. They can focus on new things. They can focus on finding new, problem categories and new solution categories, rather than just just looking at yet another variation of an existing problem or existing threat. So I think AI is definitely something we need to be embracing, but I don't think AI is the end all be all of it. In terms of threat, AI is a tool. It's a tool that's available for everyone, for good and bad. Bad people will be using AI as well. They'll probably be using for similar purposes. It enables you to scale. It enables you to do more things, be more efficient. I don't think we've really seen it yet. We've seen proofs of concept. We've seen ideas. We've seen some signs. I don't think we've yet seen really active usage of AI. I think there's two reasons for that. I think part of it is that skill set hasn't yet fully democratized. You can find really good software engineers anywhere in the world these days who can especially write code for Windows. But you don't yet find that level of machine learning or AI engineers everywhere in the world yet. And partially just at the moment you can make more money working for a legitimate company doing AI than doing cybercrime with AI. So it makes more sense to go work for a real company. Plus, there's no risk of getting thrown into jail for that. But once that changes, we'll start seeing more of it. I think also one challenge with AI, or one thing to keep in mind with AI and cybercrime in general is it is about where the low-hanging fruit is. I don't think it's not been needed or worth it yet to get into AI, but that's something we need to be acutely aware of, and goes back to, I think, your question or comment also on kind of the chicken and egg problem. We already know the bad guys are going to be using AI one day as well. Now we have a chance to stay ahead of them to try and figure out how they probably will be trying to use it and what we can do about it. We already know it's going to happen. We don't know when, and we don't know exactly how, but we can still be working on that problem already now.
And if I were to try to build an argument that's aligned with what you just said, the logic that, once again, my non-technical brain is that when we look at companies versus bad actors, even if bad actors are somehow not fragmented exist in a group, somehow they coordinate their attacks, I don't think that even with the best bad intents and efforts, they will have the scale that, for example, WithSecure does. And I don't think that with AI, the developments grow linearly. I think it's more of a different curve on the graph. So first of all, it's just a numbers game, and large cybersecurity companies with AI will be able to do much more, much faster, and perhaps quicker than the individual actors. And also, when we, for example, look at the attention from the regulators that AI has been receiving, it's possible that trying to develop your own LLM that will help you achieve your bad outcomes, your negative criminal outcomes, will simply be much more difficult. Because if we were to compare this to, for example, accessing a weapon, it's accessing the same weapon, whilst here operating an LLM that's not being allowed to be used by criminals in some way or another form. I think that helps us sleep at night a little bit better. So those two things, the scale and the accessibility to specific tools that will be limited to some.
I'd love to be able to be so optimistic about the accessibility. I don't. I think these types of tools and technologies and techniques and theories, they are accessible to everyone. I don't think it's possible to restrict them to that extent. And I don't generally view myself as an ultra libertarian, but I've seen a lot of the downsides of trying to restrict access to cybersecurity tools, for example. And what you end up with is you only end up restricting the tools that are being developed for the good guys, the legitimate users, to try and improve their security. But it doesn't actually limit access to bad guys. There's been plenty of examples, for example, of companies in the EU and outside the EU developing cyber espionage tools, developing spyware and then going and selling those to any dictator anywhere in the world. Even though that's supposed to be restricted, and even though companies like WithSecure, for example, has to put in a lot of effort into how we control access to some of the tools that our consultants use when they're going and simulating attacks so that our customers could learn from those. And that's where we run into those restrictions. It doesn't prevent, a dictator with $1 million from getting access to those tools and being able to go after journalists or dissidents or opposition politicians or, whoever. So I think I don't think that's going to be the solution. I think rather let's embrace that accessibility. Let's use it as an opportunity to again educate and demystify. If AI is this mysterious, ultra powerful technology that only some people are allowed access to because it can be so dangerous, that mystifies it even more, and that prevents us from learning about how to embrace it and how to use it responsibly. So I think I'd rather take that approach. I think in terms of the numbers game you mentioned, there's definitely a part of that to it. I think first and foremost, the big advantage we have in terms of the good guys and defending is also simply, who's supposed to know your IT systems, for example, the best? The people who built them, the people who run them day in, day out. They know those systems better, not the person who barges in the middle of the night and tries to figure out where the crown jewels are. And we have the luxury of time because we can work on that day in, day out on understanding where the weak spots are, understanding what improvements we can do, figuring out what are the pragmatic solutions to things. So I think that's one part of it. But yes, also, for example, one of the things I love about the cybersecurity industry, it's very competitive. There is a lot of competition in the market. There's a lot of companies. There's a lot of venture capital money. At the same time, there's a lot of cooperation between companies when it comes to stopping the bad guys. We all share threat information, threat intelligence across the industry, including with our harshest competitors when it comes to, hey, this is something bad we're seeing. Let's make sure that not only our customers, but all of our customers, the whole of society, stay safe from this. And then let's go and compete on, who built the fanciest product and who can market it best and who can sell it for the cheapest and all of that. But let's not compromise and compete on we keep our customers safe at the cost of your customers. No, let's rather focus on keeping everyone safe. And that's worked so far. And that's one of the things I love about the industry as well.
You mentioned something that I was hoping to ask you a question about, but you already gave me the answer. I was about to ask about international cooperation, information sharing, enhancing global cybersecurity resilience. But I also had a second question in that category. What can you tell us about the importance of responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities and how the industry encourages ethical research practices? Because what you mentioned a second ago about collaborating with even the harshest of your competitors is you're trying to build up the defenses. Here in this question, I think I'm looking more of an answer for how popular of a practice is it for companies, I'm pretty sure more like your clients than WithSecure itself, to disclose vulnerabilities, admit them, trying to balance out on one hand the ethics and the trust, not just ethics for the sake of ethics, but also for the business outcome of not losing the trust of your customers, but at the same time simply admitting to something that might decrease your perception as a business partner.
Good question, Philip. Again, I think there's two sides to it. I think in general there isn't enough of encouraging responsible disclosure, enough of bug bounties, if you want to call them that, or vulnerability disclosure, vulnerability research programs, and offering rewards to researchers who responsibly reach out to the vendor and work together to get those fixed and then publish those. We have a bug bounty program. We've had one for years. I know also intimately because I need to approve those payments when it comes to code coming from my organization. I know the tab we're running up, but it's worth it. I think, and again, there's two reasons why it's worth it. One is for the greater good. Again, it's one way of democratizing and leveraging the power of the masses, leveraging the power of all of us. Because, if everyone tries to go alone, that's not going to work as well. So, if from my perspective, we help each other improve security collectively. By also, if we notice something, we share that. We're responsible about it, but we share that. So, WithSecure as a company, we do a lot of research. Sometimes we find vulnerabilities in other companies' products or software or other companies' systems, whether that's during a consulting engagement or, we also do that as, our own research in some cases, looking at emerging technologies, for example. And also we encourage others, if they find vulnerabilities in our software, our products, our services, please reach out to us. Please be responsible about it. We promise in return we'll do our best to fix it quickly. We won't, try and get you to stay silent about it, because you deserve the credit for the great work you did. And also we have payments that we promise, depending on the severity of the issue, and we're very open about that. And from a business perspective as well, I think, yes, it also genuinely does improve the quality, the security of our products, and actually in a cost-effective manner, rather than having to hire lots of people doing that. We have people in-house who have that skill set, but they're rare. So we are able to get more people looking at our software by also offering those bug bounty payments. But then, cybersecurity, it's a trust business. If our customers don't trust us, they aren't going to buy our software, no matter how great it looks, how glossy the marketing brochure is. If they don't trust us, they aren't going to buy from us. And there's different ways of thinking about trust and building trust. Our approach is very much about integrity, about transparency. If we screw up, we admit to it. We don't pretend to be perfect, because I don't think people will believe us. On the other hand, we can really show how committed we are to improving and how committed we are to being transparent and being very honest and truthful about things. And again, that's one reason also why we want to have that. And also, you can go on our website, you can see the vulnerabilities that have been found in our products and our software that we've since fixed. We don't try to hide it, because it's part of how we build trust with our customers.
Important thing that you mentioned, although I personally think I would be the very type of person that would like to think that my cybersecurity company has never had any vulnerabilities, and I would naively believe that to be true, because I would want that to be true. But that's just, speaking something into existence. I had another question that also coincides with something that we had in the chat. The premise is that there's no such thing as a 100% secure company. There's always a way for some percentage to be the point of entry. The question that I wanted to ask, but actually Radek in our comments asks, in the context of outcome-based security, how do cybersecurity companies measure the effectiveness of their solutions in real-world scenarios? And the element that I wanted to add from my side is, let's say on home appliances, we have a measurement of electricity management efficiency, whether it's more of a green or not so much device. Food and safety standards in the UK, every restaurant has something ranging from green to red. If I'm not mistaken, such a universal standard, not provided by one company, but something as a universal standard, doesn't really exist for cybersecurity. So what Radek is asking is one thing I'm hoping to piggyback on his questions is, how can you tell, without being a cybersecurity expert, as a customer, as a bystander, as someone who's just not involved, whether the cybersecurity is there or not?
It's a good question. It's a hard question, Philip. And before I get to Radek's specific question, I do want to also touch on the 100% secure. I think, yeah, there isn't such a thing. There also doesn't need to be such a thing. The door on your home, it's not impenetrable. Someone would be able to break into your home. Chances of you ever getting burgled are hopefully slim. At least I'm lucky to live in Finland, where it is very, very slim. It's not because the doors are so tough that no one could ever get in, but due to other reasons. There a long time ago, I was at a conference where a lockpicking expert was asked, what type of lock should I have on my home door? And his answer was one that's a bit tougher to pick than your neighbor's lock. So a lot of it is also, the perceived cost of getting at you, the perceived cost of breaching you versus the expected return from that. But to Radek's point, that's one of the tough problems we're currently working on, and we're currently trying to research and trying to find ways of doing better. I think the traditional ways in the cybersecurity industry have been around measuring incidents, for example. How many incidents did we have, or how many breaches did we have? That doesn't really give you a good realistic view, in my opinion, because firstly, if you're noticing more things, that's usually a good thing. But it can mean you're not finding more incidents just because you're actually finally noticing something. Also, maybe it's been a quiet week. Maybe it's been a vacation week, and that's why something hasn't happened. Has your cybersecurity magically improved? No, probably because people are on vacations. People are paying even less attention. So that doesn't work. There's been a lot of risk-based approaches, but again, that's also had its challenges. I don't yet have a good answer, but that's one of the things we're working on at the moment, and one of the things around outcome-based security that we're really driving and pushing forward, working with a lot of our customers and partners, trying to figure out how do we better measure that effectiveness so that it actually brings real-world value and ties into not just cybersecurity outcomes, but business outcomes for those organizations.
All right. So Radek, once again, thank you for the question. If you have any follow-ups, just leave some more in the chat. So whilst we are heading towards the end, toward the full hour, I still have a couple of questions. When it comes to software development companies, what to prioritize? Endpoint detection, response solutions, server cloud infrastructure protection? Or am I even asking the right question? Can you pinpoint one category, or not really, because it's a case-by-case situation every time?
Not even case by case, but when it comes to software development, do you prioritize Visual Studio or another idea, or do you prioritize, do I need to buy myself a hammer, or do I need to buy myself a screwdriver? It's not even a case by case, but it's more like I don't think starting with the tools is the right way to start with the problem. So I think, as with software development companies, with any company, I think it starts with why do you care about security? Why does it matter? There are industries where these days, thankfully, cybersecurity is really a right to play. If you don't have a certain level of cybersecurity, you don't get to be in that business, either because of regulation, but also just because of customer expectations. Let's take the big social media companies. If they were leaking their customer data regularly, and people's private posts were constantly being leaked out, they wouldn't have users. People wouldn't be posting private stuff there anymore, or file sharing services. So there is that. It can be a business continuity thing. We need to be able to keep doing our work, or software development. If you're doing subcontracting, you're developing software for others. It can be, for example, that again, you don't want to be the path into your customers' networks. You don't want to take that risk because you're out of business if that happens. So I think it starts with the outcomes, and then you start building from that towards what are the priorities, what are the right tools for the job, and where are you at as an organization? What are your challenges? Where are you more mature? Where are you less mature? Where do you need to be go?
Okay, so I wrote this down. Don't start solving problems with tools, but the reasoning why you have the problem in the first place.
Don't go looking for a nail for your big hammer.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of reverse engineering, and if we were to go meta reverse engineering, that question is essentially, where will it hurt you the most, and where will you lose the most money and customer trust if this is allowed to happen? So with the last 5 minutes, I've got 3 questions, 2 from us at NetGuru, 1 from the audience. A similar question to the one that I asked just a second ago, but it's more about what you observe in the market. Is there a specific category with critical security controls that you see repeatedly become a weak spot? like visibility and monitoring, management of vulnerabilities, endpoint protection, access management, and I can start listing the categories and so on. But I think you understand what I'm looking here for. Is there like that, everybody forgets to have a password manager with everybody huge quotation marks, but is there some sort of trend or bad habit?
Not a single, but I think one very common challenge is around visibility and knowing what you need to be protecting, whether that's if it's a cloud native or cloud first company, or someone who's moved rapidly into the cloud, for example. Often one challenge is just knowing what workloads do we have running in the cloud, where are they, what accounts are they tied to, who has access to what, how are they configured, how are they set up. And if you aren't yet in the cloud, you might still have the same problem of we've been putting servers in data centers or co-hosting locations or broom closets for years. What servers did we actually have? Where the amount of the stories of going and responding to an incident, responding to a suspected breach and trying to investigate where is this server that's generating this suspicious traffic, and sometimes physically following that cord, and the cord goes into a wall, and there isn't a door, there isn't any, it disappears into the wall, and then you need to try and figure out where is that cord going, like where's the machine at the other end. Sometimes it can get down to that. So I think that's maybe one definitely common area that comes up. And I think that's a good example also where it's not just the cybersecurity thing. Cloud, for example, you also then can't really manage your costs if you don't know what you're running in the cloud. Someone's paying for that. Usually it's you. So before you can start figuring out, okay, what's worth paying for, how to optimize the costs, again, you need to do the same thing. You need to figure out what do I have running where, who's managing which, what accounts are they tied to, and so forth.
Okay. That does answer my question. And now for the audience one. It's relatively light compared to the technical gravity and the philosophical weight that we've been discussing before. So the question from Marta reads, hello everyone, I have a question to Artturi. What advice would you give to aspiring cybersecurity professionals who aim to excel in research and development roles? So, basically we're looking to understand you as a cybersecurity professional. How do you stay not even ahead, but, on time with everything?
So I think a couple of things. I think the first most important piece of advice is something I'd give anyone for any situation of stay curious. Stay curious about things. Focus on what you're curious about as well, because if you're curious about it, you're going to be much more motivated. You're going to find much more time and energy to look into it, and you're going to be more passionate about it. And if it's cybersecurity that you're curious about, be as openly curious about anything and everything that looks interesting as you can. If it doesn't feel like this blog post isn't relevant for me today or this week, doesn't matter. If it's interesting, if you're curious about it, if you're curious to learn, go and do that. It'll pay itself back over time. So stay curious, I think, is the most important thing. I think getting into cybersecurity specifically, in general, it is important to also understand how things work or how things are built. It can be by understanding how software is developed, if that's the area that you're currently curious about. It can also be understanding how people work. If psychology is something you're interested in, and let's say your curiosity, your interests are psychology and cybersecurity, that's a perfect combination too. But don't focus just on cybersecurity, focus on psychology, because then you'll have a much better chance of understanding how people think, how they behave, why they behave certain ways, and how to influence that. So I think cybersecurity is a lot about understanding other things and then applying cybersecurity to those other things. And at the same time, don't mystify cybersecurity. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be frightened by it. My summer internship, I did malware reverse engineering. So taking an executable file, looking at the bytecode, the assembly language, and trying to understand how it works. I taught myself to do that by repeatedly banging my head on a wall over probably 10 years or so. First time I tried to learn assembly language, didn't get very far and gave up quite quickly. Some years later, retried, got a bit further. I think at some point I managed to implement a couple of lines of code that did some very simple equation or like math thing, something completely useless, but I got something. It wasn't even hello world, but at least it was something. And again, gave up at some point, came back a few years later and kept going at it. It can feel complicated and challenging at the start, but keep chipping away at the problem and you'll make progress over time.
So please put your white hats on. Don't put any real threat out there, but try to break things in a safe environment as a learning experience to your audience. So our last question that we ask all of our guests, completely non-technical, once again slightly philosophical. I present you with a magic wand that if you wave and say abracadabra, every 12-year-old in the world gets access to a specific kind of knowledge or education on that knowledge. We've heard financial advice. We've heard leave the kids alone, don't teach them anything, let them be kids. We've heard product design, various answers, no single answer that is right, but just the answer that is yours. So I'm keen to hear, what is it?
I already gave that answer. The power of curiosity. I think that's the most powerful thing you can do. And I think that's, as a child, I lived in China, in Beijing for 4 years, went to an international school there. And I think the biggest thing I got from that was an environment, at least in that school, where being curious, asking questions, being interested, wanting to learn, that was okay. Like, it wasn't, no one made a big deal about it, but also like you weren't singled out for being interested in things. I've also spent time in schools where it felt like you weren't supposed to be interested about the things you were being taught. And that can be really detrimental. So I think what I'd want to give everyone is just the power of curiosity, of be curious and follow that curiosity. And that'll take you far.
Personally, I think this was my favorite answer ever. I agree. Power of curiosity.
Thanks, Philip.
That takes you everywhere. And I don't say that to each of my guests. You can listen to the other podcasts just to see that
I'll need to go back and check more of your interviews just to make sure.
Please do. That's actually a traffic driving strategy for everyone. Artturi, thank you so much for the past hour. It's been a lot of fun for me, and I've actually learned quite a bit of those things. We're going to be posting some of the best quotes, and you've had quite a few of those in everything that's going to happen after the episode. So Artturi, thank you so much for today. And for the rest of our audience, I just wanted to remind you that August is typically a Disruption Talks break. So the next season of Disruption Talks starts on September the 5th with our guest, the Chief Scientific Officer from Renault, the car company, discussing AI and automotive. So hopefully see you there in a month. And Artturi, once again, thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Philip, and thanks to the audience as well. And it sounds like I need to tune in September as well. That's going to be another exciting episode.
Please do. Another loyal audience member. Thank you so much.
Thanks.